Being I am the last human being on planet Earth to drive this vehicle, you are most likely aware of its cost. Now, it's not as cheap as you think. We'll talk about that later. That being the case, let's do something a bit different today. Let's understand the difference between efficient and cheap. Before you and I kick off our journey today, something rather important. If you haven't noticed, this is a pickup truck. Well, not exactly. You see, it shares its platform with the Bronco Sport, which in turn shares its platform with the Ford Escape, which means it's a tall unibody vehicle. That's why the bed is not separate from the cab. But far more important than that, notice the size of the vehicle. This has been described as smaller than a Ranger, smaller than an F-150, which it is. But that wheelbase, it's right between an X5 and an X7. Understand that as we drive this today. Okay, now that we understand what this is, how much does it weigh? Because that will play a pivotal role in the efficiency of this thing. And here, a bit of a surprise. Not terrible, 3,674 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,666 kilograms. Now, huge point of order. If this was the 4-cylinder turbo with the all-wheel drive and the different rear suspension, it would only be 50 pounds more with that. That is foot to the floor. There's a delay there, but it's not horrible like this Florida road. It's good. It works around town. It delivers power like a hybrid does. It's not trying to be a fast vehicle, but it does work very well for the mission at hand, and that is not only keeping up with traffic, but dodging in and out of traffic. Using this around the Miami all the way up to West Palm area, I have to say this has been an unusually good experience in going up and down the 95, the Florida Turnpike, even around town in traffic stop and go, because there seems to be enough power. In other words, I don't feel like I'm being robbed because it's a hybrid. So yes, it's based on a small yet tall crossover sort of platform that's unibody in construction, but you look at it and you say, yeah, that's a pickup truck, so this would be the business end of it. That bed, not appreciably smaller than that in a Ranger, but it's still functional. Like, for example, this one, the XLT, has a storage area back here. Now, one could option a fancier one with a whole inverter and plug-in setup. This one has a storage area that has a false floor to make it a bigger storage area. And then something very unique here. Again, the difference between efficient and cheap. A lot of folks like customize these things and they break into the wiring for the taillights. In this case, Ford actually gives you the line to do it. So you don't have to break into your taillights. It comes from the factory with a 12-volt accessory line, so you can add some sort of accessory in the back of the vehicle. Then there's the way it drives. And here I was expecting crap because it's a cheap car, but huge surprise. The combination of the weight, which I wouldn't say is lightweight, but then again, I wouldn't say this is heavy. All of that works in conjunction with a pretty basic suspension, struts in the front and a twist beam in the back. But that's where the huge surprise of this thing comes in. The ride quality is excellent. I would say it's a combination of almost 3,700 pounds and the length and wheelbase of the vehicle. Around town, I would go so far as to saying that this feels supple. It's not a luxury car ride, but by no stretch of the imagination does this feel like an economy hybrid. Now, the interesting aspect about that, it works to a point. So it's fully composed around town, ideal situations like very straight, flat roads in Florida. However, let's say for the sake of discussion, you're carrying too much speed to an on-ramp or an off-ramp and it gets sharp. That's where this thing comes apart. So by no means is this a vehicle you're gonna take out to canyons like we do normally in California. Everything else, the brakes, the steering, the transmission, granted this is a CVT, it doesn't get in the way, I think is the best way to describe it. And the goal here was to make a small, I wanna call this a ute, not a trucklet, that works around town. And I would argue from a driving dynamics, more ride quality perspective, Ford has absolutely accomplished that. It's usually inside where we go from efficient to cheap, but here that's not the case, and that's because of a couple of moving parts. For example, the design. Notice nothing to write home about, But the interaction with the vehicle, its knobs, its hard buttons, works very well in a minimal interior. The only thing I don't like, the rotary controller down here. Then there's the tactile feel, specifically the top of the dash and the top of the door panels, usually a huge weak point for cheap vehicles. Here, it's good. It's nothing to write home about. Then, in that whole theme of tactile feel and better than expected, the seat fabric, it doesn't look like it comes from Detroit, more Scandinavia, maybe fancy furniture or a Volvo. Then there's an X factor here, and I would call that playfulness. And it's things like details. The door panels, there's two functions to them. There's this very big cup holder. When I say cup holder, like huge water bottle you see with the yoga mommies that go into their classes in all four places in the vehicle. But then more importantly, the color has changed. Like there's a gray, it's a splash of color away from this like gray, black, and like dark blue interior. Then two other items that fall under the heading of packaging. Number one, the rear seat, specifically the bottom of the rear seat, flips up to reveal a storage area, but one side of it on the right is taken up by the 12-volt battery. And then number two, there's an accessory package that's on offer from Ford that works with these clips throughout the vehicle, and one can buy like a trash can or a cup holder that literally is bigger and sits between the back seat and the end of the front console. Okay, so all those interior details are fine and good, but there's one thing that stands out that is not ideal, and this is something that my buddy Nathan over at TFL, he told me when he was looking for these kind of vehicles. If you know him, he bought the Hyundai Santa Cruz, the direct competitor to this vehicle. And one of the big issues that he had was not just the size of the screen, it's smaller than in the Hyundai. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal for something in this price range. It's the angle of the screen. I thought he was crazy when I first saw it. That was before I drove it. But now that I've driven it, it's angled a bit too far this way. I can see why they do it to keep the glare from impacting usability of the screen. But overall, there are probably different ways to do this that would make this more usable. And yes, I agree with him. Probably do a larger screen here because you got plenty of bins everywhere else. Other than that, great, usable, functional interior. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game, Mind the Options game, with today's contestant, something that is efficiently priced, but not priced as efficiently as one would think. You see, when these came out, they were famously $19,995 plus destination. They are no longer that price. Now they are $22,195, but that's for the basic XL. This is the middle model, the XLT, and there's a Lariat above that. This one is $24,855. What do you get for that? Well, not much. More tie downs. Instead of 6, there are 8. Then there's cruise control. Yes, cruise control. Not level 2 autonomy, just old school cruise control. And then it comes with wheels, which is kind of sad because I like the Steelies on the basic XL. Then this one is fitted in a very non-unique color. You see, I'm driving this around the Miami area, and I see a lot of them, and every one of them are cactus gray. Thankfully, we don't have to pay extra for it. You do have to pay $4.95 extra for a red or a yellow, which look good on this. Then there's an appearance package here. It's the black appearance package. That's the grille, some of the details around the car. It changes the wheels to 18-inch wheels from 17-inch wheels, and their black finish. And then it changes the interior, takes away the playfulness of some of the orange bits, which really make the interior stand out, and it makes it black, which makes it look cheaper. So why would I pay an extra $1,645 for that? Then we press on to the spray-in bed liner. I would say this is a big deal, $495. There is a cheaper, like plasticized version that one can put in there. And then destination from Hermosillo, Mexico, $1,595. Wow, a Mercedes Maybach from Germany is $600 cheaper. Go figure. That brings us to a total retail price of $29,235. Now, for grins and giggles, I priced an XL the way I would want it. You can't get a sunroof in the XL. You can get it in this, and that is an additional $995, as well as a sliding rear window, also not in the basic one, $155. But without that stuff, in the basic XL, in the color I like, it's kind of like a blue, that was $24,685. And now we have to get to the business of this vehicle, and that is the efficiency. Now, the US government calls this the front-wheel drive hybrid for 42, 33, 37 combined. Now, I have indeed been driving this a lot, probably about 200-300 miles so far in the Miami, West Palm area. A lot of freeway, so I was expecting to get less mileage, not the full 42. However, my result, drum roll please, 40.2 mpg, and that was a lot of highway driving. And as an aside to that, I've noticed the electric motor, the hybrid electric motor, works a bit more in this Ford application than similar sized Toyota applications. Like going down the freeway, I noticed this goes into electric mode a lot more than some of the Toyota applications you and I have driven. Is that the functionality of the two propulsion system, or the fact that this doesn't have as much metal and glass in the ass end of the vehicle, thus lowering the weight? Who knows? Overall, now 40.3 mpg average. Okay, so let's go back to the question from the top of the episode. Efficient or cheap? I would argue neither. This is cheerful and efficient, and brings me back to a discussion we had with our good friend Felix Holst, who used to run Hot Wheels Design, and he famously said, good design does not cost extra. And that's really what sums this thing up, which brings me to the wish list. I don't want to ask for anything because I think it's going to bring the price up. So I'm going to ask for something that Felix told me really shouldn't cost extra. And here's my suggestion. A different color palette, at least one more varied. Different reds, different blues, a solid yellow, maybe even a brown. Something that doesn't have to be metallic to keep the price down, but the reality is these vehicles, and this isn't marketing mumbo jumbo from like someone in Dearborn, people who buy these, they're young. If they're not young, they have an active lifestyle, which means they're open to different colors, which would make this very basic design and its very unique packaging stand out with some of the trim that you see here. But I am just one man, and this is the point of the episode where I turn it around to you to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you sharing this with all your friends on your socials, clicking subscribe, and notifications. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.